That would be the one addendum I would add as we talk about the value of broadcast. But I do think it's important to the college football story over the last couple of years. Speaking of the college football story, Richard says, I'm a 3-time University of Texas graduate and season ticket holder for 30 years. But I think that the college football, that college football going to 12 teams for the playoff is horrible for the sport. Your topic today was about event versus inventory. But how special will the end of the year Ohio State versus Michigan game be if the playoffs weren't on the line and it was only about seeding? Almost 20 million people watched that game last week. If there's a chance they may play again in the playoff, does that happen? What do you think, Ben?
I mean, as a traditionalist, when it comes to sports or college football, of course I hate it. Like, honestly, I would like to go back to I think that we were closer to having it right with the BCS. Have everyone go to the traditional. Why is the Big Ten team should go to the Rose Bowl? They should play the Pac-10 champion. Fine. If we must have a national, like, I didn't mind it when you had like the polls and you had like debates for months about who was actually the right winner, right? But if we must pick 1 and 2, then we have one game after the Bowls. We have one game, and then we get the top 2 teams and play there. Like, I'm fine with that as my personal view as a sports fan.
It's really terrible. On the last show, you were actually annoying me. You kept saying we were old men talking about social media. I object to that characterization. I think that we do have our finger on the pulse. I think the older millennials and Gen X are the only sane people who can process the internet like in any reasonable way. Not all of us, but some of us, we are fluent enough in technology to sort of understand what's happening.
Right, we can actually remember the world before the
We
internet.
have a reference point, exactly.
Right.
And so that informs some of our takes. The old man take, though, I agree 1,000% that the BCS title game was better than the 4-team college football playoff. I find the 12-team college football playoff like appalling. I'm right there with Richard. And that is a true old man take. And the regular season was still important, incredibly important in the BCS era. You did get one title game at the end, so you got to see 2 great teams. You also got 2 or 3 months of incredible arguments and hugely dramatic games on the way up to the title game. Like, all of it was great. And this new reality, completely foreign and appalling as far as I'm concerned.
Right. So what I would say to Richard is the current situation is terrible. The 4-team playoff, we're in the worst possible equilibrium.
There have been a lot of bad playoff games.
No, yes, so I'll explain why. So number one, we already have the situation where you can lose a high leverage game like Ohio State, Michigan, and still make it. We've seen it happen several times. Okay. So we already devalued the regular season for the absolute best teams, for the Alabamas of the world. Like we saw right now, Alabama lost to Texas, should have been out, yet they're in regardless. Right. So so number one, by expanding it to 4, that 3rd or 4th spot, we left open the space for a team that lost a super huge game to still get in. So we already developed the regular season. Number 2,
Ohio State last year. Ohio State lost to Michigan and was still in the playoff, just to further your point.
That's right. So number 2, we're stuck in this place where the reason we want an Ohio State or an Alabama in that 3 or 4 spot is because if we don't, we invite in some scrub team that gets their rear end kicked and there's a terrible game, right? So and so there's been so many terrible college football playoff games sort of over the years because you have teams that went undefeated, congratulations, but they just weren't up to the level to compete with the SEC champion or sort of like whatever it might be. I was going to put Big Ten champion there, but I have to have some degree of intellectual honesty here. It's usually the SEC champion. Okay. So, the Georgia's dismantling of Michigan 2 years ago sort of still fresh in my mind, but so you have a situation where it's almost too big, but it's not, but it's also like too small. The advantage to the 12-team playoff, I understand why they did it. The 12-team playoff is designed, sorry, not to go full sports here, but it is clearly designed. The first week of the college football playoff is designed to suck, meaning they can now let everyone in, and the first week they clear out all the crappy teams.
A formality. Maybe you get a thrilling upset thrown in there, sure.
Which is great. If you get a thrilling upset, that's very exciting. But the plan is that there's going to be 4 teams that quote-unquote deserve it, And so congratulations, you made the football playoff. Now go lose by 40 points to Georgia, right? And then you have 8 teams left, all of which are awesome. So then you have 3 weeks of super incredible games. I think that's why they went with 12, to guarantee 3 awesome weeks of football. And frankly, I think that's better than 4. You see that this year, right? If you put the proposed bracket of the top 12 teams, you're going to have 4 terrible games the first week, and then the last 3 weeks are just going to be unbelievable games.
Incredible. Yeah.
This is what the NFL does. The NFL, you can get in with like the NFC South team this year is going to be like 6-11 or whatever. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to get wiped out on the first Saturday of the wild card weekend. It'll be fine. And then you go forward, and the last 3 weeks of the NFL playoffs are always awesome because you have like super awesome teams in there. Having a weekend to clear everyone out is actually good for getting better games. So I think there's way too many games. I think is a bigger issue. Should they shrink the regular season? What should they do sort of along those lines? I think the regular season too long is already be a bigger issue. I do think, though, bigger is actually better than 4. They've actually been in a worse spot for sort of the last decade. Now, is this devaluing the regular season? Yes, I would say that's already happened. And the forces pushing to have this huge event that's going to drive huge advertising numbers. Again, part of this shift to broadcast is advertising is going to be it's going to return to being the most important way to monetize. The carriage fees, as they decrease, you have to make it up in advertising. You make it up in advertising by having ever larger and ever more significant and bigger games. And the other thing with a playoff is you can sell guaranteed inventory. When you're selling a regular season game, yes, you can always sell Ohio State versus Michigan.
That's what I was going
to
ask.
You don't know what the big games necessarily are. Now you know there's going to be 3 weeks of amazing games at the end of the season that you can sell for a premium. So I'm a traditionalist. I agree with Richard, but I think all the structural forces of this shift in the industry is driving to this. And it's worth pointing out, again, there's some things about this that are going to be better than the current system, particularly right now.
Well, at the risk of making this too confusing, listening to your answer at the end there, what they're doing is creating more inventory of events that they can sell. And these are predictable, huge games, and it's easier to monetize than just not knowing what the huge game is going to be and what network it's going to be on. And so from a business standpoint, it makes sense.
Right, which they can sell the rights then for also, right?
Exactly.
Like, so
we
don't know who's going to bid on this.
Right. I will say, watching the college football regular season, college football is not dramatic enough on its own to be appealing to me on a weekly basis. If there's not
the stakes that make it,
every team could lose and it could end their season. Like, the stakes are what make it magical to me. And
yes, I would prefer I would prefer they go back to. I actually thought the BCS system was good.
It was perfect. Now
if you lose one time the whole season, you're screwed, right?
Yeah,
and that's definitely not going to be the case. Like, this is a dramatic devaluing of the regular season. That said, it's still, even a regular season game, even though it's not quite the event of the playoffs, it's still more of an event than like college basketball or the NBA or baseball or hockey, where there's a game on every single night. And that is even then, it's still more of an event sport. And I think we'll continue to sort of do very well because of that.